Are you there, Mike?
Yep.
There you are. How are you
Okay.
tonight?
Good to go. Good, burden, but good.
Burden, but good. I titled tonight's broadcast Stone Steps. We don't want you to tell that story. Of course, you've already told it, and it's going to be revealed tomorrow night. It's amazing, as I've been saying, Mike, that you share your dream of 2013 of the Stone Steps in this webinar that I have not been able to sleep since hearing it. I've been in prayer, I've been watching, I've been praying. And besides you telling your dream, Stan Deyo in this webinar tells his vision of 1997 and the super
Oh, wow.
volcano that erupts in another nation and what he saw and how he flew in a plane after having this dream, this vision, a vision. He flew to that location and walked in the very streets he saw in the vision, and there was the buildings that he saw. And he saw mist and heat coming up from the ground, and he asked the people, do you not know what this is? It's funny how this webinar, both of you, his vision of 1997 and your dream of 2013 is being revealed. And are we living in a prophetic time, Mike? What is going on?
You know, we have to be. It must be. I think that people were born, Pastor Paul, in this generation. I think that a lot of people were born with, they would hear people preach the gospel when they were young. And I can almost guarantee that they could hear people preach it as though things were going to get better, but somehow internally they knew that was not the case. I believe that just about everybody in this generation who believes in Christ was born with a prophetic eye, right? No doubt they're drawn to the book of Revelation, right? They're also drawn to some of the things that people normally kick out of their minds. They can't do that. They honestly can't do that. And then Stan Deyo had one in 1997, you say?
Yes.
It makes me wonder what happened in 1994, right? Because something took place in that around the time of I say that 1994 because you remember that time I told you I was in Texas, and in the middle of the day, I'm sitting at this bench, and all of a sudden, I start having these series of things, right? These snapshots. It's like a page flipping of different events that were happening where they've been, something happened back then. It must have affected something back in the 90s, must have affected everybody because that's also when most of the geopolitical landscape changed. Lots of things and everything started changing in the 90s. And here we are today. It seems like the times we're living in right now are times of fulfillment, real times of fulfillment, not like other times we've lived in. Everything is starting to conflagrate, coalesce into one moment, right? And I honestly believe that all of these things that people are saying, they are messages. A lot of people say, well, wouldn't God warn us? He has been, but who's been listening? You know how when you're driving down the road and something internally will say, don't go that way, go this way, or don't leave yet, leave in a minute. And then you find out, had you not listened to that still small voice, you would have been in trouble. And I believe that these volcanoes and storms, right? These things that Christians are able to see, because one thing in the Bible it just says it over and over again. It says, you will see this and you will see that. Well, you have Christians who are witnessing an absolute change, a change in the mentality of humanity, a change in geology, a change in the planet itself, a change in how people think, a change in standards, a change in quality of life, a change in every aspect of life. I believe the Lord is speaking, and we're the ones allowed to see it. But the question is, are we taking note of it? Because things are speeding up now, right? And it almost reminds me, when people do recognize these things, I believe they do. Sometimes we can't put it all together. But you remember when John the Baptist was preaching in Matthew, and he said, the Pharisees and Sadducees came up and he said, you generation of vipers, who hath warned you to flee from the wrath to come? They were coming to get baptized right?
Right.
To perform with the other ones who were clearly being shown the way, but they tagged along. And he said, "Who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? Why are you here trying to, get into this, what I'm doing here for these people that are indeed free?" And so you have that same situation today. You have a lot of people they have a curiosity, right?
Right.
They don't believe, but they have a curiosity. Um, that same thing is happening right now. It's almost like a foreshadowing of some very heavy things that are coming. And I would, boldly, I would say, not one soul has the time they think they do. Not one person has the time they think they do. I can't even shake that. And of course, for how many years? It's been quite a few years with this one incident with the stone steps has been because I'm just like everybody else, right? I see myself like everybody else, but I can say this one thing. I've never gone into a situation blindly. I've always been prepared, always. And I believe it's not because I do everything good and right and all this. It's not because of that, but I do have a genuine heart for people. I have a
Yes.
genuine heart. I like to see people make it. And I have a tendency to do everything I can do to see somebody else make it. Because of that, I think that the Lord has prepared me for everything I've ever gone into. It's never been a surprise, right? Never.
Right.
Nothing is ever a surprise. But to see something unfold like this, that's so heavy on the populace of many different nations, is tough to deal with, especially when you see it forming. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, "Should I ask the Lord, can I have, see things like that?" I said, what don't rush in, don't do that, because
Don't rush in.
don't you might not want to live that way. It's very tough to live
That's a
that way,
tough deal.
right?
Let-
It's like your hands are super glued. You can't do anything. You're just
Yeah.
watching events unfold. No
Well,
matter what you do, keeps going.
Mike, Daniel in the Bible, God showed him things, and it made him sick for days. God would show him a vision, and then he would say, "Oh my Lord," and then in the mouth it was sweet, but in the belly it was bitter, and he would lay down and be sick for days, and then finally it says he got up and did the king's business.
Yeah.
John, same thing. It was incredible to be shown these visions and revelations of the last days. Same thing happened to Hosea. Same thing happened to Joel. All of the ancient prophets, when they received it. And today's prophetic voices, yourself, Stan, and others that may see, myself, others that may see things that you would rather God actually, once you see it, you'd rather not have known. But then you have this responsibility to lead others to the cross and to warn people to flee. Jesus said, warn them to flee from the wrath to come. Let me ask you something. We've just had an incredible situation now where I've made a proclamation, and I hate to even say it, that for the first time since World War II, the President of the United States is no longer the most powerful man in the world. I think that President Xi, when he was able to put together Iran and Saudi Arabia into a peace agreement to open up their embassies in the next 2 months, and then the very next week walk into Moscow, into the Kremlin, and put his arm around Vladimir Putin like a little brother and say, "Don't worry, I'm here," and then and sign agreements and make a proclamation that the world has changed. Something has been done, he said, that hasn't been done in 100 years, and nobody's questioning it. We're able.
They already know.
Mike,
They already know.
what's happened?
They already
Mike?
know. Pastor Paul, the statement I normally make about Israel, right? And
Yep.
it really bothers me. And in Revelation, Israel is trampled underfoot for 42 months.
Yeah.
How in the world can that happen with the USA? With the power we have, how can that happen? And I believe that, this is another principle coming to pass, that a house divided against itself shall not stand. And in other words, people are born into a generation, right, where everything is normal. But if we were born 100 years ago, we would say, I can't tolerate this place.
Yeah.
Or I can't
We
tolerate.
would.
A lot of people can't see the iniquity. That's like a lot of people say are demons rising. I get I get that question a lot. And I'll say, what do you mean? A demon could walk down the street and people would shake his hand because he'd be, this is a conducive environment
Yeah.
for evil, period. People are doing anything and everything. And so the Lord has this habit historically of taking a nation who he loves, because Christians are here, right? Christians who believe in Christ are here. And it's a lot of temptation around us, but they're here in this country. And so we know he loves us. We are that country, not the landmass. It is the people
It's the
in that
people,
country
right? It's
that make
us.
that country. So he's
Right.
looking at us and he loves us. But we have to have an alarm clock because we've joined into the same fights the world is having. And have you noticed, I'll say this, but as the church as a whole, and it's something that we're going to have to be woken. This is not a popular statement, but the church as a whole has to really desire Christ and not join in with what the world thinks is going to fix the world. Because the world says, well, all we have to have is a right leader, and then the world is fixed. Well, guess what? I do not agree with anything the world is going to agree with, because in the Bible it says, love not the world, right? Don't love the world, but love the Lord. And the world is calling for some person to fix everything, but the church has done the same thing. Instead of standing right there on the front lines, we're armed with spiritual weapons of warfare for defense
Amen.
of those who don't know any better. We didn't do that. What we did was buy into the conversation of the world. In essence, we let our guard down. That's not operating by faith. That's joining in with the voices of the world, which weakens the entirety of the nation. And that's precisely what we have done.
The Bible says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world, for if you love the world, the love of the Father is not in you.
That's right.
And we have a tendency, as even as Christians, to get consumed by the world and the world's problems and the world's issues. And Jesus said,
that's right.
Look, in Matthew 24, you want to know what's going to be the signs of the last days? I'll tell you. But don't be troubled by it. Don't be distressed by it. Because
it's not for us.
It's not for us.
It's not for us. We're ambassadors.
Right.
In this world, we're supposed to intercede. So when presidents are making bad calls, we go up there and say, hey, you might not want to do this because of this. But the problem is they've looked at the world, and the world has become the standard of many Christians, right? Because what you see now is you see politics are replicated inside the church.
Yeah.
That should never be.
No.
And the Father. So we need an alarm clock, right? And we're getting that alarm clock. Our bluff is being called. And so when our bluff is called, it doesn't mean it's the end of this nation. It means it's going to wake us up, because we have to lose that stability we have found in the world and have our stability redirected back to Christ. I can assure anybody, once you stand upon Christ, the world is not a scary place. The things to come are not a scary place, because we're ambassadors to it. We're citizens of a place that already exists. It's untainted by mankind. We're citizens in this earth. We can go anywhere in this earth we want to with the powers of that kingdom. But we don't know that. And Satan works very hard to get people not to know that, because most Christians right now, they say, well, I'm powerless. Nobody will hear me. That's what he wants you to believe. He wants you to believe that you can't do anything by yourself, and that's a lie.
Right.
You can do everything by yourself. It is, we can't operate by the world's philosophy. The world says you can't do anything by yourself. That's not true, because number one, you're never by yourself. Number two, when you operate in faith, somebody else is going to see you. You're going to start a fire. That's
Amen.
what you're going to do, is start a fire. And that's how things get rolling. But we will never accomplish that by the ways of the world.
Amen.
We have powerful instruments so these things, Pastor Paul, that are happening, I don't see them reversing. I really don't.
No.
And in fact, as of late, there's this, it's very difficult to explain. It's almost a push, I guess you could say. Makes you kind of forthcoming, right? It's like, okay, well, if I'm going to go ahead and say it. I have to stand true to my own convictions. But there's no surety in any ideology of the world that all those sureties are gone. A power shift has certainly happened.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
We have lived off of our own propaganda. You know what? We have gotten too fat. We conquered, we built, we achieved, the world looked at us, then we sat back in our lounge chairs and began to complain about how the drinks weren't cold. And we've been doing this for what, 100 years?
At least 100
Right?
years. I think that President Xi was saying that the party's over. I think that
Yes, it is.
he's saying the party's over, that there's a new world order in getting ready to be completely established, that it is here, and it's going to bring devastation, I think, to a lot of folks because they're just not going to know what to do about it. And boy, if you don't have Christ in your life, folks, you're going to be lost puppies out there in this world. Mike, let's talk about this now. Let's talk a little bit about some shifting going on. I just read earlier in the broadcast that the United States has moved some of its better planes, F-35s, some of that, good stuff out of the Middle East. They're moving in instead some older stuff back from the Gulf War days of 91, some let's see what they call these things, US A-10 Warhog tank killers, and some of the older stuff, A-10 jets that they're bringing in, some other stuff. Now, I'm not saying they're going to, I'm sure they're not abandoning the Middle East, but they are moving some stuff out. They said they got to put it over more in Europe to protect what's going on with Russia and also China. And they also got to put stuff out in the South Pacific, concern about what China may do with Taiwan and other issues. Can you help us understand? I mean, is there
Sure.
a vacuum being created here that leaving Israel alone on an island almost?
That's a cover story,
Okay.
right? That's a cover story, number one. And it's also a statement. Why would anybody in their right mind take antiquated or less effective machinery against an enemy they don't completely understand? Why would they do this? Why would they even announce that?
Yeah.
Right? When you have movements, there have been so many movements just like that, Pastor Paul, where you trade off your mission equipment because the mission has changed, but you don't publicize it.
You don't
Why would they
say
publicize it?
Yeah,
Of all things, why would they? Because it's not like they printed a list of the inventory they're moving,
no.
right? They didn't do that.
No.
So they wanted everybody to know anything that people, if you see something in the news, they want everybody to know it. And you know why they have to do it through the media now? Because China's not taking America's phone calls all the time, right? Biden probably has to get somebody to call President Xi 20 times before he gets a message back. So they're snubbing us, right?
Right.
That's what's happening. We have been arrogant and somewhat, we've been feuding internally so long we've lost our footing. We actually believe in our own reports. So this equipment move, first of all, is a cover. Second, it's a snub. It means if they're announcing this publicly, what they're really saying is, well, you don't pose a real big threat to us. So what we're going to do is send some of our old equipment for an old foe because you don't deserve, right, for us to face you down with modern. But that's a mistake. That's by principle, that is a big mistake. Lots of people are against the U.S. even doing something like that to publish because you don't provoke your enemies to wrath. You don't do that.
No.
We live in a civilized world, but what they're doing that's a teenager's move right there.
But why
That's
are we
something a
doing
teenager
it?
or child would do.
Well, isn't that kind of crazy that we'd even be doing that?
That's a snub 'em because yesterday, right, the last 2 days, a lot of experts finally admitted that they finally had to bring some true inventory to the table. It's going to change how people look at the U.S. It's going to change quite a few things, right?
Yeah.
In other words, our bluff is being called, and enemies of the U.S. are going to move on that bluff. That I can assure you. See, we're looking at something beyond staging a war. We're looking at the first moves of a war, of a real war. There have already been confrontations under the seas, in the oceans. There's already been confrontation. China is emboldened. Why? Because they have turned around so many of our submarines, so many of our aircraft, so many of our ships, and they have also deployed. What they won't publish is that China often deploys radiation shields, right? Like now when I say radiation, more like microwave shields, but they have a high intense line of radiation on the outer bubble. They have technologies that they really don't share outside. I know that they have given that same technology to Putin. He must assemble it himself, but you're not going to get anything past that radiation bubble. This is something that people are going to be well acquainted with. It's in their aircraft, it's in their mobile vehicles, it's in their ships, right? It will diffuse a laser. If you fire a laser at any of their craft, whether in the air or something like that, it will diffuse that laser light. It will not go through that shielding. It won't. That laser will be effectively diffused. They couldn't even complete their 6th-gen fighters, and we were highly confident they couldn't make this device. But when they did, everybody shut up. That's when people got nervous. There are people nervous right now because they know what's coming next.
Well, you've been talking.
They know there will be a confrontation.
You know, you've been talking for some time, Mike, that Russia's been using a lot of their old stuff in this over the last year in this Ukraine battle. That they really got some high-powered stuff they've been holding back.
Yes, they do.
Some
Yes, they do.
lethal, dangerous stuff that, I mean, I had a dream, and in the dream, I saw the dread on the faces of these young men and women. Because,
yes, they do.
Because Russia was pulling out some type of weapon that brought the dread. I mean, it's like the blood was out of their face. And I talked to you about it, and they do have weapons that would create that kind of dread.
There are things worse than a nuclear weapon. Much worse than a nuclear weapon. Pastor Paul, I'll give you an example. I mean, it's kind of obvious. It should be. It took us to get Elon Musk to perfect some of his spacecraft so that NASA astronauts and space missions could go forward. Elon Musk has been instrumental with Air Force Command, with Space Command. He's been instrumental. Without Elon Musk, the mission would be set back quite a bit, right? And so, but Russia, they've had no such issue. People ought to keep that in mind. We were hitching a ride with Russia to get to the International Space Station. So people ought to keep that in mind. They've been doing this mission so much, and you don't hear anything about, every third launch something explodes. Not to mention our astronauts, but they have contracts with the world. They send satellites up into space, heavy satellites they send up into space. We're still utilizing some of their technology, the technology they developed back in the 60s through the 70s and 80s. We still use today. That concept does not belong to the USA or Elon Musk. That is a Russian concept, right? And they never stopped engineering some of their propulsion systems. So they have things that will just make your head spin. They were instrumental in helping Iran pull down some of our drones. See, we forget these things, don't we?
Yeah.
And how many times have they gotten through our defense net? Another example is they mapped out every single base in the USA and overseas. Russia did. They mapped them out for 2 years straight before anybody ever knew that they were monitoring our soldiers, right? Because cell phones, they as soon as cell phones came out, and when everything went digital, Russia and China are so savvy concerning software, right? And MCUs and processors and the language and how they work and all this, that, and the other, that they could actually do things we couldn't even dream about. They hacked. When was the last time you heard that Silicon Valley was hacked? Which is why they had to scrub a huge portion of Intel's chip making process. So there have been things happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And what's happened to us is that we believe in our own propaganda. It's almost like America creates stories. Then we turn around and believe in those same stories, and they're not real.
Yeah.
They're just not real. And these other countries, they have probed us. Truth be told, when those balloons came over the USA, 2 of them specifically, that scared a lot of people.
Yeah, it did.
Because they saw what they were employing. And I don't believe that people understand the damage that was done. That's why you don't hear about the balloons, do you? You don't hear anything about the balloons, do you? Not a peep, not a word. Well, there you go. Because if they could actually take it apart, look into it, see what it was, this, that, and the other, they would gloat about it. They would brag about it. They would shame China about it. But that's not what they did. They obtained what they could obtain, and they couldn't believe what they were finding, right?
Right.
And it was almost like China was giving us a message through that balloon and the technology on it that you're just, you better step up to the plate before you start making threats. As a consequence of that, we're in a very delicate time.
We
And
really are.
the first time, these nations, if they already perceive that NATO has broken down. NATO was not coordinating. They're just not coordinating.
So
They
let's ask our
disagree.
question. So, I mean, obviously, NATO, I mean, look, there's no way we could be broken down. Is there something going on? Is there a hidden agenda here? Or have we fallen asleep? Or is the current administration just went AWOL, just completely have gone to go to bed early?
Well, this is I normally don't have an opinion politically, normally,
Right.
right? Because I really don't side with one party over the
No,
other.
I understand your position.
They're just
You
jobs.
can't. Right.
But as of late, that word democracy it's not the same. It's not what it used to be. Democracy is not what it used to be. It's defined differently. They're not employing the practices of what used to be democracy. Plus, democracy is only worked by way of an honor system. You cannot enforce democracy. That makes it communism, right?
Yeah.
So you can't enforce democracy. Democracy must be chosen. What's happening is that you have a lot of people who they speak about that title of democracy,
But they don't practice
but
it.
but that's right, and they demand immoral changes so far from the root of how the USA started. It's just totally different now, and they're doing a lot of dirty things right now. They're preoccupied with trying to persecute each other.
Yes,
Right now,
yes.
that's real. That's the governmental civil war. That's what that is.
You've been
And
talking
it
about
will
that
not,
for some time
it's
now.
not going to stop. It will build.
Yeah.
It will build to the point to where we eventually have to disable certain practices for a time, and we'll have something near to a council to make decisions here in the USA. I strongly believe
A
that after
council,
a time,
that would
yes.
be no longer a republic.
That's right.
We'd no longer
That's
be a
right.
republic at that point.
That's right. Because the whole thing is going to have to break apart at the same. See, the problem is it does not matter who you put in office. That doesn't matter.
No, because
there's an influence, Pastor Paul. There's an influence. This right there in Washington, D.C. is throughout America. There's an influence. I can almost guarantee that anybody who sits in power, who is not covered by the blood of the Lamb for real, is going to fall prey to that influence, period. There is no safe place from it.
So where's this influence coming from, Mike? Is there a group of guys sitting somewhere else at Davos or sitting somewhere in Geneva or wherever that are running this whole thing and are just are superimposing their will? Is there some I mean, are we talking about demonic forces, principality powers?
We are. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Okay.
You're talking about more of, think of it this way. And this is where it gets into the hard part.
It's the
right?
devil.
But because we're so close we're so close to a change. It doesn't matter if I say it or not. There are elements of the USA. There are elements of every single country that a lot of people are not acquainted with. I'm not talking about lizards running the show. It's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
The nature of the spiritual realm is a bit more tangible than what people would feel comfortable with. It's a bit more tangible. It's also prevailing. It's all over the place, right? Demons like to hide. Demonic entities, these intelligences, they like, whatever people call them, whatever they call them, they like to hide.
Yeah.
They hide, do their dirt within a person until they're confronted spiritually. Only when confronted or cornered spiritually do they ever lash out, like, what they are. Well, if somebody ever did that, they would find out that more people have been taken over than anybody would ever feel comfortable with. That's number one, right? It has corroded many institutions, and all of a sudden, in the last 3 years, people have been very accommodating to certain powers, right? Like the true power in this world. If we're talking about the kingdoms of men. Well, they're not the White House. They're not these governmental entities. They're the folks to control the influence of the people, period.
Well, let me ask you
And
something about
so,
that. Let me ask you about that. I was on the phone today with a guy who is um, yeah, he's a scientist, but he's deeper than that. I'll put it this way: CERN and AI. He said that he's got information. He said, if you want to, run it by Mike. He'll either confirm it or deny it. But that CERN, that they are using an AI technology now, that they say AI has been able to cross the veil and has made contact with the other side. In other words, forces of darkness, that literally the AI technology is now communicating with satanic beings, and they're doing this now at CERN, and he's sure they're doing it in other locations. In other words, let's go this way. Hitler in World War II, he had the brightest minds, the scientists, but he had and he was into the occult, and they were reaching in to talk to Lucifer for the plans of how to win World War II. Certainly, and we took that technology. We went and got these guys, these scientists, in what's called Operation Paperclip, and we brought them to America because we wanted that technology. We wanted to understand some scientific breakthroughs that we didn't understand. But with that, we also got some of the satanic stuff that goes with it. So I'm asking is there any way, can AI be possessed with demons? Can it reach and speak to entities beyond us as humans?
well, let's go there.
Okay.
Let's go there. Okay. Long time ago, this guy made a radio, right?
Right.
And the radio was picking up voices that were not, broadcast on the radio.
Okay.
In fact, these were interactive voices. You could actually ask a question and you get an answer. That was by radio. That was a long, long time ago when the radio was in its infancy. Well, since that time, there have been IBM made a special computer. It was one of their computer systems. And instead of a voice coming back on the radio, it came back in the circuitry, right? It was coming back as binary, the binary alphabet back then. And so they furthered that. MIT got a hold of it. Right now, MIT, Harvard, all the way, these guys give a lot of stuff to Los Alamos and all these different places. And to be honest with you, while a lot of people, they think the narrative deals with, UFOs and stuff like this. No, it does not. It's dealing with contacting entities that are in these other dimensions.
All right.
Right.
Yeah.
This disclosure, this latest disclosure, I hate to disappoint everybody, but the latest disclosure is more of a flop than anything else, because what they were actually doing, especially at these the different ranches, they were at 3 ranches, in fact. What they were doing, they were looking for these historic spiritual entities, not UFOs. Not UFOs, a byproduct of these things. That's part of their little deceit thing that they do. But anyway, they were looking for actual entities. They were communicating with actual entities. Area 51, there were some ceremonies down at Area 51. It's not been the same since. One of the large ceremony chambers is underneath the ground, right? They already know what these craft are. Have they had craft retrievals? Yes, they have had craft retrievals. Most certainly they have had them. But they understand the nature of the universe better than you know. See, we think of Earth. We go to a different city. We see, if we're Americans here, Caucasian, African American, whatever the case is, you go over in China, you see somebody that looks different from you.
Right.
Right? So they have that same mentality. They understand the universe so much. They know this is on a universal level. Not like going to see another person, but you see another set of entities, or you encounter different spirits. We're spirits in containers, right?
Yeah.
I'm a spirit. Everybody alive.
All of us are spirits in
we
a
have
fleshly
containers.
Yeah, this is our tabernacle. Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
So with CERN, one of the first things they found out, one of the big mishaps that happened at CERN was because they actually used good scientists who believe in particle physics to do one thing, right? But when they capture the data, when they start to parse that data and they start, picking everything apart and looking for what they're looking for, they have the brains of the operations looking for these spiritual connections to other dimensions. Well, guess what? If you can take a positron or something like that out of the other dimension, which has properties that would blow your mind, right? Some of these elements are tiny, yet they can run this world for 100 years if they can harness the power from it, right? Just one little tiny
You're
part.
talking about a technology now, like a zero energy technology.
Right. But if they can do that, then they've extracted something from a plane of existence that human spirits don't exist in. They've actually gone into another dimension and extracted material, right? Tangible material. Well, as far as that word tangibility goes, but they've extracted something from it. Well, through
Okay.
that came contacts, right? Because
Yeah.
when they expand these fields at CERN, especially when you're dealing with magnets, and by the way,
Yay.
through magnetism, do you not know that you can be put in a state of where your subconscious wakes totally up, and you will most certainly float away from? They can induce an out-of-body experience. In that out-of-body experience through magnetism, you can turn around and look at your body. You could go fly off to another hospital or the coast and come back and then call the coast and say, well, is this there? Is this person
Whoa,
in? They'll
whoa,
say,
whoa,
yeah,
whoa,
it's
whoa,
right there.
whoa,
You want to
whoa,
speak
whoa,
to
whoa,
him?
whoa. I mean, is this, I mean, you're talking an out-of-body experience. Are you talking remote
They can
viewing?
induce it.
Is that remote viewing?
No. That is not remote viewing. That
Okay.
is, and listen, here's what I'm saying. They can
Okay.
induce, right, an out-of-body experience. So if you're sitting right there where you are,
Yeah.
and let's just say somehow you ended up in Russia, right? And in Russia, you start looking at a certain building. You hear people talking. So you come back after your little 2-minute session, and they say, what did you see? You said, well, I was at this building, and I saw so-and-so. So they call the building up.
And that
And they
person's
ask
there.
for so-and-so answers the phone in that building and says, that's what I was doing. How do you know
So
this?
how does
That's
that
how far
happen?
they have gone.
Are you saying we have technology now that can do that?
That happens through super magnets. That
Super
happens
magnets.
when your body is put in a powerful magnetic field force, right? Your spirit is ejected. There's no string attachment to your body anymore.
Right.
As it turns out, one thing they found was through magnetism, you're first of all, doctors started all this whole thing because they wanted to know where the soul was, right?
Right.
That's what they want to know. They also wanted to know what keeps the spirit in the body, because they've had perfectly healthy people lose their will to live, and they just died. Their body will still be functional, and then all of a sudden it will be gone, and the person will be absolutely gone. So they wanted to know, what is this, right? So they have developed technology where they can see certain biosignatures that just don't match any other waveform, any other pattern or anything like that. So they assume that although they can't nail it down to a spot in your body, they know it's in the body.
The soul of
Through
man.
magnetism.
And so they're
Or the spirit. They can detect, let's just say they can detect the spirit of a person.
I
pretty
believe
much.
that. I mean, I understand they've actually could see this 21 grams.
Well, they went further. They went to induce a strong magnetic field to try and see. And the reason why they selected a magnetic field was due to these experiments with radio. Through accidental discoveries and different findings, they found out that magnets traverse both this dimension and the other dimension.
Okay.
So a magnet works. If you hold a magnet in your hand, it's doing something in the other dimension while it's doing something in this one. And so through magnetism, through the control of that magnetism, they found out that you can weaken the connections of a person's, connection to their body, so to speak, and their body's gone. And they have an out-of-body experience, which means the person's breathing has slowed down so much. They can almost be, it's just everything slows down a whole bunch. The person is unconscious. There are no wave patterns in the brain or anything else. Yet this person is having an experience.
Okay, so I think I'm getting it. We're a soul, a spirit, and a body. So even when people are near death experience, and the body is dying, the soul is living. the soul starts to move away from that dying body. It's still, because it's alive. You don't die. Your body might die.
They think it. That's right. They think it happens through. We don't. We never die.
We
right?
never die. No.
Like a lot of people say, well, we're going to shut our eyes and nothing. No, you will not.
No, you won't.
What you're going to do is
You'll
you're going to
never
find
die.
your body weakening,
Right.
and you're going to keep going.
You're going to keep going.
But it's going to look
So
like
we
everybody
now-
else. Your eyes are shutting.
So what you're saying is, we know that happens. So
Yes.
they are figuring out how that happens.
They have found out
Separating
how
the
to
soul from
induce
the
it.
body by using magnetism.
Temporarily.
Yeah,
Temporarily,
temporarily.
they
I
can
got it.
cause
Wow.
an out-of-body experience.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite fascinating, but I can believe that. I can understand that. I can conceive that because of the fact people do have out-of-body experiences, especially near death or maybe die temporarily or whatever you have. So they have figured out how to
yes.
work on it.
Those are very dark.
It's a dark.
I would say those are dark science.
Those are dark science, but it's going
Yes.
on, and
Yes, it is.
so
Yes,
and
it is.
AI is tapped into this some way. I mean,
Well,
you know,
it takes here's the kicker. Artificial intelligence
Yeah.
is very fast. It learns its environment, right? It learns very
Quickly.
quickly. It can do the task of every human being in the world
at
on a
once.
chip. So imagine a whole army of people at CERN, an entire army. Well, it knows how to examine configurations, what worked and what didn't, because it's analytical. It's reading the outputs and everything else at the same time. It can resolve its own issues, update its own software on the fly for a much more efficient outcome. Right? You can't track, nobody can track exactly what AI is doing. The processes, they know exactly what it's doing. It just does it real fast. So if you had a person that can actually record magnetic fields around a person
Right.
every single microsecond, think about this. The magnetic fields around a person constitute how that person is held together. Right?
Yeah.
If you interject an anti-force at the same time that force is being constant, you can actually interfere with holding a person together in some sort of way or fashion. So with this, trying these experiments, they found out that every time they do this, there's another mechanism operating within the AI, right? In other words, a spirit, this is what they think, a spirit has always had the capability to interact with electrons through magnetism.
All right.
Not so much energy. Right? I know a lot of
Okay.
people with the ghost shows and everything, they say, oh, it takes a lot of energy to do this. No.
No.
They found out the opposite. They found out that they interrupt energy. It doesn't take a lot of energy to do anything. Through focus, they interrupt energy. And they verified this with the super magnets. So you have one of these demonic entities, not in a solid form like us, right? Not in a tangible form. They can actually interrupt energies. Right? So they
Unbelievable.
come around, they stop magnetism from being so constant. You have dimming lights, you have different reactions in the home. It's just like if a person gets angry, they do the same thing. They can interfere with the electronics around them. Right? A person gets upset or something like that, a light bulb blows every single time. Now, people normally don't take note of this, but all they have to do is think, and they'll say, wait a minute, every time I got mad, infuriated, severely depressed, or I got some bad news, something did blow out. That's what or
That's
something
amazing.
malfunctioned.
That's amazing. I remember one time I was Dr. Irvin Baxter, and we were at Channel 40 in Indianapolis, which is a television station, and we were on set, and I'm interviewing Dr. Irvin Baxter, and okay, we're talking about the second coming of Christ. And in this and the cameras are rolling, and we're talking about the second coming. And he says, well, as lightning goes from the east to the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. That's a scripture. Jesus said it. He said, Paul, you don't understand that the same thing with the when the Lord translates us, when we become an image and likeness of Christ. He said, you have to understand, we're going to be changed in a moment of a twinkling of an eye. There's power, energy. When he said it, one of the huge lights that was over top of us, huge spotlights, exploded in fire. Okay, exploded, and they stopped the cameras. And I said, "What is going on?" Exploded, fire came out of this thing. I said, "What in the world's going on?" And I looked at the cameraman and I looked at Bob Poplin, who's the producer, and I said, Bob, what is going on? You guys got a problem in here? He goes, no, we've been here 40 years. That's never happened in history. And I said, Dr. Summerall, Dr. Summerall, I said, Dr. Baxter, I said, you're talking about being changed a moment, twinkling an eye. Is that what you're talking about? He goes,
And
when you start talking
yeah.
about spiritual things, Paul, physical things can manifest. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that the rest of my life. Because he was talking about something like that, did he tap into a spiritual realm, or did he hit a?
Well, and let me offer this. And I only offer this because, believe me, the Lord says some things that are very real. I know that for a fact. It doesn't matter what anybody else. I can stand it. If I were in a world where nobody believed, it would not bother what I believe. Let's put it that way.
Okay, all right.
But let me explain this in a very simple way. Well, not really explain it. I'm going to give you an image to look at.
All right.
When you're talking about Christ,
Yeah.
right? You tend to be focused on Christ, not on yourself, right? This is
Right.
one of the first things that happens. Now, your body is an insulator. Your body is a big, huge insulator, right?
Okay.
And it insulates what's on the inside of you. So your body is a limiter. In other words, you know how people walk around, they say, I wish I had the power to do this. The truth is they do have the power.
Oh, so our body slows us down.
Their body is a limiter.
Our body's
It's a
limiting
limiter.
us. Yeah.
Now, when you focus on your body, it's like pain. If you get cut, but you don't see that cut, right?
Yeah.
And people can talk about neurology and all this, but this is different. When you don't see that cut, you can walk around. You're uninhibited. You don't have a limp, right? I saw a guy do this with a 2-inch gash in his thigh. He did not know it. He did not misstep. He didn't have a limp or anything, right? He's walking around normal, which means his muscles, although they were split, they were working.
Yeah.
How's that possible, right? So he's walking around like this. All of a sudden, somebody says, hey, you okay? And they start giving that comfort talk. He still didn't see it. Then when he looked down at his leg, Pastor Paul, I'm telling you, it was almost like everybody around him got weak,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It was like at first all of us were full of energy. And then when he concentrated on that cut, he was weakened.
Right.
So he didn't know.
that feeling.
Here's the deal, though. A lot of people say, well, that's because his neurons didn't fire back, and so he didn't perceive the pain. Yeah, but if your leg is cut off and it falls off behind you, how are you going to still take steps? You only have one leg. Is what I'm saying. This guy's muscles were severed.
Right.
His leg should have been dangling. He had no. You can't use your muscles when they're severed. And this guy was walking normally, is what I'm telling you.
Yeah, because
right?
it's beyond muscles.
So,
You're
but
saying
what was that? He did not look at his body. He didn't think of his body as limiting, as being a limiter.
Right.
And often when a person is sick or something like that, right? One of the first things they do is they think that they're at 0 and somehow they need to get to 100 for the body to be healed, right? Your body will respond to what a person's will is.
Yes.
So
it happened to me.
Here's the key.
Yes.
The key is not to look at something and say, okay, let me think real hard and fix this. That's not the key. The key is to go beyond it, and your body will catch up. Your body has no choice but to catch up. Now, when you do that, if you're injured or something like that, and you say, look, I don't have time for this injury.
Yep.
I need to finish this task. What normally happens is, well, miracles happen. Yeah. Miracles do happen, Pastor, right? Because Mike, God is order.
I know you're telling the exact truth. It happened to me 30 years ago in a car accident when we rode the car and I broke my neck and I'm underwater. I do not know my neck is broke. I do not know this. I have to get out of this car. I got to swim up 20 feet to the top. Then I go back and get this guy who is still in the car. I pull him out of there. We get back to the top. We crawl out of this ditch. We walk a half a mile. I have no pain. He's got a broken shoulder blade. He's got a broken collarbone, and he's got a concussion. He's messed up. We walk a half a mile. It's freezing out. It's 12 degrees. We're completely frozen in mud and ice. I beat the door. This guy opens the door, and I said, can you get an ambulance? My buddy's hurt bad. We got to get him to the hospital. And he says, don't you want to go to the hospital? I said, no, I'm fine. I said, can I borrow your phone? I'll call my wife. He goes, you're fine? I said, yes, I'm fine. You're not hurting? I said, no. Then why is your head sitting over here on your shoulder? And when he said that, I reached up and realized that I had something seriously broken. And when I realized my neck was broken, my left arm went completely limp. I couldn't use it for 19 months. I had to go
There it
through
is.
therapy.
Yeah.
But until someone pointed that out, I'm operating in some kind of superhuman strength. I guess what you're saying is that strength is really in us until we realize we're limited. We limited our.
You can override your body. One of the key things
Yeah.
I've found from having injuries in combat, Pastor Paul says, always make sure the reason you go forward is not yourself.
Oh,
In
that's
other words,
true.
you do it in love for somebody else. If anybody who's sick out there would walk forward for their children, for their spouse, for whatever the case is, I listen, the Lord will bless that. He'll accommodate that. He will allow things to be overpowered.
Amen.
I'm telling you, the only reason I say that is because I'm supposed to be a disabled individual, right? I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be dead.
You've been wounded.
But I'm not.
You've
I've
been
defied,
wounded a lot.
I have been wounded multiple times.
Right.
I've been messed up, but nobody would ever tell that. In fact, when I go for medical reviews and things like that, Pastor Paul, they just shake their head. They say, "What is this? Who are you?" That's what they say.
Right.
Because I'm not supposed to be the way I am.
Right.
I'm supposed to be all, just messed up. But here's the deal, though. When I pray, when I'm talking to the Lord already knows I have things I have to do.
Right.
Right. I just can't sit here.
Nope.
So, it's either he's going to heal me or I'm going to limp all the way forward doing that work. But I have already settled it in my mind. I'm going to go forward for other people, not for me, for other people. Because I will not benefit from the good I do. I won't do that because I do it genuinely for other people. And every single time, there's a healing.
Amen.
There's a healing. So
Amen.
that's part of that. That's what CERN has really found out. So when you're talking about spirits utilizing AI,
Yeah.
do you not know they've already been in the computers? Your computer is prone to you and spirits. Not just evil spirits, but to the individual also. Have you ever been in a rush and you really need your computer to respond really quick?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden,
But it
before you
does.
touch it, all sorts of screens pop up.
Yeah.
Or you hit the same square, the same spot on your screen you hit for a week, but you hit it this time and it does not go to the menu or the phone locks up or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
That's another example of that.
Wow. Folks, Mike around the world with us tonight. Obviously, this is some good stuff. I'm talking about AI. I'm talking about its capabilities to go beyond the physical realm we're in, the natural realm we're in, which means we are admitting that there's other dimensions beyond what we can see and feel and touch.
Sure there is.
Because if there wasn't, there would be no God. There'd be no forces of good or forces of evil. And so, Mike, again, just before we look, tomorrow night, can I ask you a question, Mike? I want to go live tomorrow night. The webinar starts at 6. I was wondering, I want to go live tomorrow night at 4 o'clock. I don't know if you have any time to give us a few minutes before this webinar starts.
Yeah, we can. We most certainly can.
I don't know. What's a good time for you? 4:35? Is there?
Go ahead and name it. I'm good all day tomorrow. So go ahead.
All
and name
right.
it. I'm good all day.
Let's
tomorrow.
say about 4:30, 5. Let's say 4:30. Is that good? Eastern?
That works.
Okay.
That works.
So, folks, tomorrow night we're going to just do a little special broadcast. The webinar starts at 6, and then everybody's going to go to that and really get into it. But Mike and I are going to go live at 4:30 tomorrow just to kind of prep you for what's going to happen. Because, Mike, you share a dream of 2013, and you would tell me about this for the 10 years I've been interviewing you. You would bring up the stone steps from time to time, and finally, the first time in 10 years, it was time to tell the dream, and you told it, and it's going to be on this webinar. How should people prepare for what they're going to hear tomorrow night?
Well, I'd say this. First and foremost, don't think I'm special, right? But I do believe that the Lord gives warnings. I believe that. And in this case, through dreams, the Lord has prepared me for a lot of things in life. I don't share every dream. Some of the people in COT, they know about Russia going into the Middle East that a lot of people thought was impossible. Nevertheless, Pastor Paul, right before they had that meeting, after they went to the Middle East and had that meeting, when all the leaders got together by those tents that were on a concrete slab by the waters, I had a dream about that and described that to COT, right? Well, months later, as a year later, something like 2 years later, there it happened. One of the people in COT spotted that out, and they said, "Oh my Lord, is that the thing right there?" So obviously, through dreams and visions, the Lord will show me things. I believe He
Yes.
does that because I'm willing to talk to people. Right? That's what I believe.
Yeah.
He does that because I'm the one with the microphone, given that certain
Right.
time. But in this case, this one is a plague, right? This really is a plague. And with this one, it's step by step things have been happening to they're centering into this one point. So if that thing, if all of it comes to pass, if this one little piece comes to pass, my goodness, we
When you
have
say,
so much to discuss.
you know, when you say it's a
And
plague, it's been a burden on you to
it
carry.
it really is. It won't. You can't see.
Yeah.
I had to be true to what the Lord shows me. Right.
Right.
I cannot be true to what somebody else saw. I can't be true to what somebody else understands. I have to be true to what the Lord has given me to understand, because that would be disingenuous for me to, add to it, take away, believe in something else somebody has. But when the Lord gives me something, I have no choice.
Yep.
But that's what He gave me.
Yep.
And so it always sounds impossible. It sounds impossible. When I had that dream, only 3 people were told that dream, right? Only 3, and that was in private. Even they can't believe it. They cannot. They can't even believe the circumstances were, because, well, Pastor Paul, the elements were not there. It was not probable that would even take place, and then all of a sudden everything began to alter, and here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
There's no
So,
question. And because I
it is
see
a
that,
burden.
and because I see what's happening, and after hearing the dream, then I pray, God, I hope this thing don't come to pass. I hope it doesn't come
me
to
too.
pass. But I know that there's nothing I can do, but we'll share it and get people praying and get people ready, because whether we can stop anything or not, we can at least get people to get themselves ready and get their families ready because of the times that's coming. And that's what,
According to that, it's imperative. It really is a very it's not like other times.
no.
This is almost like people are being watched. I'll put it that way. It's almost like they will guarantee or disqualify themselves from citizenship, depending on what they do.
Yep.
And
This is a moment of truth, and people
this is a big one.
need to not react emotionally,
Right.
not to react,
That's right.
but to pray and to act according as the Holy Spirit leads them. And I think that's what I got out of this last night. I went to bed and I said, God, what in the world do we do with it? He said, you've got to tell people they don't react because someone else does. Don't react because of your nature. But you better be led by the Spirit of God, and He will guide you in all truth, even during the times that this dream that you had as it develops.
Absolutely.
All right,
I agree
well,
with
Mike,
that. My
I
goodness.
tell you what, I look forward to talking to you tomorrow night. We'll talk at 5:30 tomorrow night. We'll go live, folks, with Mike Around the World, a special edition. And then the webinar will start at 6 p.m. And be sure and get your tickets, because you don't want to miss not only what God showed Mike, but also what God showed Stan. I can't believe that both of these guys are ready to reveal this information, and they didn't talk to each other. No ideal. But see, this is how the Holy Spirit works. This is how prophecy works. There comes a time when it needs to be revealed, because people need to get ready. So, Mike, I appreciate you coming on tonight. I truly do.
God bless you, Pastor Paul. It's always an honor.
Well, the honor's mine. Believe me, brother. God bless you. Appreciate it.
All right. God bless.
Mike Around the World, folks. Tomorrow night I'll be back again at 4:30.